Welcome back to the BigAsp Cornhole podcast, where we want to bring you this beautiful interview with 6x6 baggers by our sponsors. First and foremost, Cornhole Solutions. Do you have a cornhole problem? Find your solution at cornholesolutions.com. Use code BigAsp. Get yourself 10% off those boards, and they are sexy. And then our favorite bag company, localbagcompany.com. We say it all the time, Pro Blend Resin. Get yourself some. You do yourself a disservice if you don't try it. So visit localbagcompany.com and grab yourself a set.
Also brought to you by Airwolf Athletics, helping athletes become the alpha in all aspects of life. Stop by airwolfathletics.com and check out all their amazing products. Become the alpha and join the pack today. Visit airwolfathletics.com and use code BIGASP for 10% off your purchases. At this point in your cornhole life, if you haven't added a set of the sexiest bags around, you're doing something wrong. That's right, Blackjack Cornhole. You get free shipping, amazing customer service, so it's really a no-brainer. So stop what you're doing, grab your bags from blackjackcornhole.com. Code BIGASP is going to save you 10%. And last but not least, number one in our heart is Nick Feinstein and Bags Board, the maker of the original Cornhole Bag Backpack, now offering a build-your-own feature that has over 10,000 combinations to choose from. Need patches to go on that sweet-ass bag? Bags Board has some of the best around. Visit bagsboard.com and grab yours today. All right, folks, welcome back to the Big Ass Cornhole podcast, where we are now joined by JD Welch, the founder and owner of 6x6 Cornhole Bag Data. What's going on, JD?
Not too much, just making sure I'm having a nice, relaxing evening. I haven't told you guys I'm kind of nervous. This is my first big intro into the podcast world, so
we're popping his cherry in the cornhole world. This is so exciting.
Yeah, our mics don't even work.
I know,
so.
Dude, I know. I keep talking. If the audio sounds weird, we are having difficulty in the previous episode. So if we sounded weird interviewing Corey and Josh, it's because whatever reason, our sound mixer will not connect to the fucking computer, and we've never had an issue.
Never had the issue.
I don't know what the.
And it's also, it's like this stuff's happening at like 9 p.m.
It's so frustrating, and we're already a few drinks deep. So like by now we're loose. We don't even give a shit. We're just gonna let this roll. So JD, thanks for joining. This has been a long time coming. We've I know you and Dane actually had talked before. You and I had touched base for quite a while.
We did, and I'm just terrible at keeping up with things.
But he did tell me that you had reached out and stuff. So tell us a little bit first before we get into 6x6. Obviously, you have interest in cornhole. How long have you been playing? How long have you been involved in the game? How'd you get your start? All that stuff.
Only about 3 years is how long I've been playing. Originally, my girlfriend actually learned about cornhole from her brother in Montana. Okay. So she was visiting him one holiday. They went and played at some local, I think it was her friend's backyard. She's like, "This is awesome." Came back to where we live here in Oregon and looked on Facebook and found a local group, and she went and started playing about 6 months before I did. And then that's when I joined. We were playing, looking at bags, and that's kind of how 6x6 actually started. We were like, we hear these bags from manufacturer A, manufacturer B, and like trying to compare them off of websites. And I couldn't figure it out because I'm super analytical. Like I looked, I was like, cool, so-and-so has a bag speed of like 5 and 7, and this other person has a bag speed of 5 and 7. I'm like, how do I know that those bag speeds are actually the exact same? And with my background, like just knowing some physics and understanding how to do research and stuff, that's where I like really started out. Like, I can do this. I can start measuring bags. I can create a standardized speed for all of these bags so that I know if I'm looking at manufacturer A and manufacturer B, I know the speeds are comparable to one another, not just what the manufacturer says.
So most importantly, your girlfriend got you started in the game. You guys joined.
Yes,
Are you guys still partners?
We've been out for about
doubles.
6
Are you guys still doubles partners?
We do doubles stuff. We've been out for about 6 months. Some personal stuff came up and got in the way, but we are getting back into it here this winter and trying to find some leagues and places to play in our area. It's blown up. Like when we first started, there was like one place to go, and it was Tuesdays and Thursdays, and that was it. And now, if we wanted to, we could play 6 nights a week if we wanted.
Who's the better thrower?
Oh man, it depends on the night and how many beers we've had.
Okay, well, let's say.
So who gets better with more beers?
Yeah,
that's the question.
Most important.
Oh, she 100% gets better with more beers. After like 2, I just tank.
So, all right, so you have a cornhole like bag, and now, so we'll get into that a little bit. So you guys are in a league though. So obviously you put your hands on tons of bags. What do you guys typically like to throw? What kind of bags?
I'm playing with the Minnesota Tailgate Omegas. It's got like a nice carpet on one side, and then it's like the Game Changers Fast side on the other. Yeah. So like it's medium speed. I'm learning to like control it and figure out. I learned how it plays. I can predict how it plays on the board. If I need to, I can push pretty easily. She has been playing with, it's the I have to remember their names, out of Canada. It's an Apex bag.
Yeah, Octane.
Octane. Yeah, Octane
Really?
Apex
Okay,
is.
you guys, okay. That makes me feel better because you guys said you were playing with like Ultra Vipers. I mean, it makes it kind of boring. But the fact that
We
you guys
have
are
them,
playing with
yeah.
like two lesser known companies, I guess you would say,
But
makes it kind of
great,
cool.
great bags. Like that Omega bag, I remember when we first got it in. Like, holy crap!
Because they
Great
had
bag.
what other series did they have?
I mean, that all three of them from MN
Yeah,
Tailgate
yeah.
were really good.
Yeah, I do. I remember that. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
and he
was
just
hoping
came
they had
out
one of
with
the sets
2 new
bust on
ones.
me.
yeah.
Oh man. Yeah, so like Mike from Minnesota Tailgate, he just came out with 2 new sets of like the Beta and Delta, and one of them's got a great carpet that I'm like, I love the feel of the bag, I love the design. So it's one of those like, if I have to transition, I'm still going with his bag just because I've had really good quality and like experience with his bags and just him in general. He's helped me out a lot in like the beginning of like when I was buying bags to start the website. I was like, hey, can we like cut a deal? And he made some custom bags for me to do testing to like set specific measurements and stuff. So it's pretty cool.
So people who aren't familiar with 6x6, essentially, if you're listening to the show, you're probably familiar with the ACL. And if you're familiar with the ACL, you probably have seen like their bag statistics. Well, 6x6, you guys actually came out with the same data only earlier before ACL ever released after their stamp products. So you have a background in physics and is it engineering you also have a background in, or?
Oh man, I wish. No, it's actually, so I have a bachelor's in exercise science and a master's in kinesiology. And it's like the focus in neuromechanics. Like my thing is like neuromechanics was biomechanics, so I understand like physics of the body, physics like forces and stuff that happen through exercise, and then the other part was motor learning. So it's like learning how your body learns new motor tasks, and like that really helps for like teaching people how to play cornhole. It's like, hey, like here's your throw, giving cues or like instructions of how to increase, like hopefully get somebody better at playing cornhole.
So what do you do for a living?
I'm actually an instructional aide for middle school. So it's like, it's perfect though, because I love that I can ride my bike to work. It's like 8 to 4, like it's just perfect combination of what I want for a job and gives me the freedom to work on 6x6.
Okay. Did you ever have like you ever going to be Professor Welch? Like that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I have been, like I've actually taught university classes and stuff. I've worked at a couple of the universities here in the area, and I've taught like 1 or 2 classes as like adjuncts, but it was one of those things like I can go work as an adjunct and not really want to teach all those credits and have to do all the grading, or I can do what I'm doing right now and get paid almost the exact same amount and have way more freedom. So
yeah, I'm an adjunct faculty member for a physical therapy assistant program for like a college out here, and you're right, like it's almost not worth all the extra time. Yeah, I mean, like I hope they don't listen to this, but like
I highly doubt that they're listening to our cornhole podcast.
But it's so like, but I find it interesting that you have a kinesiology background because we look at things a little differently. You know what I mean? Like when you watch somebody throw, I'm not just watching them throw, like I'm seeing how many things that they don't realize that they changed that can improve their throw. And then I also get amazed at watching how good some of these people are with these unique throws and how much they've mastered it. Like, so somebody like Jay Rubin or Jordan Powers, right? They're the first 2 that come to mind because they have so many moving parts to their throws. Like they're big looping back. Like there's so many things that could go wrong. Like, does that ever impress you? Like watching somebody like that and be like, holy shit, like how do they repeat that time and time again?
Yeah, every time. That's like when I tell people, it's like, all right, if you want to learn how to throw, try and reduce what's called like the degrees of freedom, right? Like lock elbows, lock knees, like try and make it to where like you're stiff as possible and throw, and then like as you get used to it, then like increase step, like just switch things up. But yeah, like people just like these crazy wild throws. Like we have a guy who like kicks his back leg up and almost kicks people in the head as he throws. I'm like, I don't understand how you're so accurate every time with this like super exaggerated throw.
No, it's so true. Like I see it all the time. I never understand it. Like somebody, like I said, so like Jordan Power, Jay Rubin comes to mind, even Matt Guy. You know what I mean? Especially when he steps. You know what I mean? It's a very busy kind of throw. I'm trying to think who else. Jimmy Humans was a big step, but he's very clean on his release. So he really quiets down there. But you know, I always get thrown off by like watching new people throw, and I feel like people would benefit so much on watching videotape of them throw. So we did a contest with Anthony Ione a few months back where
Oh,
we had
yeah.
2 winners, and they videotaped themselves, and both people came back and told us separately messages saying like how much they benefited on having somebody break down their throw. Have you ever thought about like adding that aspect?
Kind of. I mean, I still have like one of the classes I taught was it was motor learning. It's the very basic part of like what is a movement, like how do you break that down into individual components. And I like doing more of like teaching somebody how to gain the skills to make themselves better, instead of just like sitting down with somebody and be like, all right, here's your movement, let's fix your movement, because I can just be like, do this, this, and this, and it may work for a little bit of time, but I'd rather give somebody the skills to where like they can self-analyze their own movement, reflect on it, and modify on their own.
So what do you think
If that
is
makes sense.
going through like again the kinesiology side? So like
Yeah.
hey, I'm listening to this podcast and I'm like, listen, I want to improve my throw. Do you think part to whole practice is important, or is it something where they should just be practicing the whole repetition the whole way? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, that's always hard, like, right? Like you have to build that muscle memory in each and every aspect. So like if you like, I was thinking like break it down, like if you're a stepper or you're like a stander, right? If you're gonna take a step, it makes sense. Like you taking a step, you create extra momentum in the throw so your shoulder doesn't get as tired. So if you're gonna do like one part in your shoulder, like you're not gonna step, like really just go for it and wing it. So you build musculature in your shoulder, and the harder you throw, like the less accurate you'll tend to be. But if you do it enough and you build the musculature, you then get more accurate. So there's like all these multiple components. But yeah, like it's always good to break it into individual components, get good at that, and then try and combine them all into one long thing. But it's always like do this little bit, and then do this component, and then do this component, and then do the first 2 components together, and the second 2 components together, and then put all of them into one. And that's how somebody will be able to create those motor patterns to make themselves more accurate. So it's like, yeah, work on that swing and that throw. And like, if you're working on the throw, also work on your grip at the same time. And if you're going to step, like do a little step and throw, like a big step and throw, and then make sure you're looking at getting your grip, and definitely like not worry about accuracy of like getting in the hole, but aim for the board, right? Like if you can get it on the board in each of those aspects, that's awesome. And if you can get the 4 on the board, doing like the full movement, that's where you try and figure out like, how do I get it? That's where they focus on like getting in the hole every single time.
Work your way
If
to it.
that makes
I've
sense
always
for you
thought of it
guys.
like
Yeah.
having an idea of like where people can submit, like if they're having an injury, like and
Oh,
it's
yeah.
got to be cornhole related. Like there's so many. I get a lot of questions every once in a while, like elbow pain. So we have like
Oh, yeah.
medial and lateral epicondylitis, and really comes down to how much wrist extension or flexion they're getting. You know, especially when we're seeing so many of these guys trying to put like so much extra torque on, especially new
Oh,
people.
man. Yeah.
Like they get tons of that wrist extension going forward, and that's that's gonna basically it's gonna be like tennis elbow, or you get a lot of shoulder impingement with these guys really trying to come across their body, and especially getting like the back loaded or the front loaded bags and stuff like that to try to get these roll bags. They're getting a lot of shoulder impingement. Like I've worked with Eric Anderson, local pro about it. Whenever he has like these shoulder issues, I'm like, well, it's because your mechanics suck. I'm like, you need to hit the gym and start working on these other parts. And I think there's an avenue that's still open for that kind of stuff, where people like with backgrounds like us, like there's avenues where we can find a niche in there. I think we just need to
Oh, yeah.
we need to collaborate.
I just want to call you out real quick.
Okay.
Just, for everyone at home, epicondylitis. I mean, that's just tennis elbow.
Yeah.
Just call it fucking tennis elbow, all right? He just wanted to throw in that fancy word in there for everybody.
That's what it's called.
All right, just call it tennis elbow.
People can go to the
I don't
computer
care about your
Google either one.
epicondylititis, all right?
All right.
Let's get out of here.
Anyways, sorry.
No, I mean, on the other side, though,
Go.
not only can you help people with their cornhole throw, but all I'm hearing is that you might be able to help Sean become a better dancer. He desperately needs it as well.
There's a chance. We just have to like figure out the routine, figure out the movements.
Strip it down real far. Yeah.
Done.
Yeah. I mean, there's one part that I may not be able to teach him, and that's just body awareness. If he doesn't have the body awareness to learn the movements, then he's just not going to be able to do anything.
He's aware of it, but I don't know if he's aware of how much of it there is.
Okay, so you get involved in cornhole. You start seeing a whole bunch of different variety of bags.
Yeah.
Where you guys play, so obviously you and your girlfriend, you guys throw 2 bags that are probably not very common in your area. Do you tend to see the same series of bags generally in your leagues? Like what bags are popular in your area?
When we first started, it was like throwing bags, game changers, like all cornhole and ultra. Like those are the main like three sets we started with, and then eventually like local bags came in, like local and like Reynolds and stuff like that. Like they started kind of coming more in, and like like we had one guy who was like a Reynolds rep for a little while. Like he just bought a bunch of bags on wholesale and like was then like selling them off to people. Like okay, it's perfect. Like we're getting more exposure. But recently, like it's all over the board. Like any bag that I see running through all the different Facebook groups, I've seen in leagues around here, and it's definitely like kind of the flavor of the week. Like we'll see people like, oh, I got like some of the new Surefire bags, and it's like cool. Like how'd you like them? Well, they're okay. Well, how much did you pay for them? Oh, like $300. It's like cool, dude. Like I'm glad you bought a bag that like you thought was gonna change your game, and it isn't that way. And like we were like commenting, there's a guy we know who was selling a bunch of bags. He had probably 30 bags. He's just selling off. He's like, I just don't use them. I found that I don't like them. Like I personally don't throw well with them. And he's going back to this bag that he bought like 2 years ago. And that's just what he knows best. And that's what he's working with.
So when you decided to get this all started, how difficult was it to convince companies that this is something that they should want to have done for their bags? Like, so again, 6x6, you're basically breaking down these bags on weight, thickness, speed in quotes, like, or coefficient of friction, however you want to phrase it. How do you approach bag companies to be like, hey, this is worth it? And obviously, like, if it's going to be a lucrative company, all right, something that you obviously don't want to lose money, do you find that bag companies are willing to send you stuff to get data?
It's actually still a struggle. Like that's one of the big things that I still have trouble with. We do have some people who are open to like, hey, like I need my bag, like Nola bags. He's like, hey, I have customers who want speeds. He's like, I know that they vary depending on like humidity, temperature, like which varies all over across the world, like the United States and the world. And he's like, but I have people who just want numbers, and so here are all of my bags, and I'll pay for them to get tested and stuff. But there's a lot of people who reach out and be like, hey, like I provide the service. This is for both the players so that they can truly compare bags to one another, but it's also a marketing tool for you because like you can use all of the data that we like anything that we measure you can use in any form of website. Like we try to make it as open and enticing to manufacturers, but it's still kind of a hard time to get people like to I don't know what it is exactly. I don't want to say like value what we're doing, or I'm not trying to like discourage anyone, but it's like we've had a hard time trying to like, this is important, right? Like having standardized speeds really helps customers compare your bags to what they know, right? Like if they only throw Reynolds and they have 6 sets of Reynolds and we have all 6 of those Reynolds on the page and they want to go to Surefire, if we don't have those bags, then and they really want to see how they compare to one another, they're gonna have to ask like their friends, which I'm not saying is an issue, but like if your pool is small and you don't have a lot of people to play with, or you don't have anybody to test those bags, like how are you really going to compare them to one another?
Well, I think what it comes down to is subjective versus objective data, right?
Yeah.
Like, so when we do bag reviews, obviously, like we get bag like speeds, right, for each side. It's subjective.
Yeah.
I mean, like we try to let it know, like there's obviously going to be a variable range based on external criteria and whatever. But
I mean, half the time we try to throw the bags on the same board, but like it's a rarity for me. I mean, it's like half the time I'm warming up for a league, doing bag reviews and stuff, and trying to get data off of that. And I mean, it's just really for us. Like, I feel like most of our statistical data that we come across is just feeling the bag in our hand and knowing what it's going to play like.
Now, a lot of it now is feel. We know the materials. I have a clipboard at work, right, perfectly smooth. And I have like a ruler.
That's how you do all your speeds.
Seriously, but it gives me a good gauge on how much it's going to slide down. So if I have 2 bags, I'm really not sure which one's the faster, slower one. I know it's like a poor man's speed test, but it gives me a good idea of like, okay, like I know if it gets to this height, this is what other bags fall in that range. And this is what I consider. So I try to just group them together. So walk people through, I think the thing that most people are most interested in, right, or infatuated with, are speed of the bags. That's the number one question. Like, what are the speed ratings? Walk us through the process on how you do a speed test for a particular bag.
Yeah, so like, I've tried to standardize in every measurement the best I can. we talk about like controlling variables, which is like controlling things that would impact the measurement itself. So I use the exact same board every single time. I make sure it's like dusted off. I use a stepper motor that control, or like an or a Raspberry Pi that controls a stepper motor that pulls the exact same every single time. Like I've taken out as many variables as I can to make sure that every measurement is the exact same. I was like, you guys probably saw, like I got a little tent and a heater and a dehumidifier and a humidifier to like control the environment in which I'm measuring bags, so that I can say every single bag has been tested exactly the same way. So with all of that done, I get a bag. I have a little clip that I put on the bag. It's then put on the board. It does an initial pull, which kind of like gets it set up on the board. The stepper motor reads a force gauge. It'll go down until there's negligible amount of force on the force gauge, and then it'll measure the coefficient of friction of that bag. So it starts off really slow and ramps up to a set speed, pulls for a second at that speed, and from that I can get the static and kinetic coefficient of friction. So like, and those are the two speeds that I have. I think we have the stationary and the sliding speed. So stationary speed is the static and the sliding speed is the kinetic.
So why? Okay, so I understand this. If I'm listening, I'm like, what the fuck is he talking about static versus kinetic? Why is it important to have both those? So static, to me, if I'm listening to it, that's going to give me an idea of how hard a bag is to push. If it's just setting on the board, how much force I'm going to need to kind of push through that bag. Kinetic is going to be what most people would consider a speed scale, right? Like if I'm throwing a bag, how fast is it going to move up the board?
Exactly.
How do you explain to somebody the difference between speed, right, like on a number scale, and then coefficient of friction? Because I think some people, I tried to, I don't think I did a good job with it. I had Eric Ryder on the show right after they did all their testing for the bags, and he kind of jumped over the question, never really answered it. So I tried the best I can. I'm interested to see, you do this all the time. How would you explain to an average player the difference between like the speed rating of what you get and then a coefficient of friction?
It's kind of hard, right? So if you measure coefficient of friction, it's usually between a 0 and 1 scale. 0 is something that's actually faster, and 1 is something that's slower. So and if you've looked at my speeds, they're between 0 and 10, and anything that's faster is actually 10, and anything slower is closer to a 0. So like I get these values and do some calculations on them and then get my speeds. But these speeds are based off of, I said, like the coefficient of friction. So my best thing is like, if it's a stationary, or like the speed of it just sitting on the bag, that is the static coefficient of friction. It is exactly said. It's how hard it's going to be to get that bag to push. Like if it's just sitting there in front of the hole, if it's a really low number, it's going to be harder to push compared to if it's a higher number. And then if it's the sliding speed, or just like what we call the traditional speed, because most people don't really worry about, I'd say like it sitting on the board, but like how fast is it going to slide up the board? How fast will it actually slow down, or how short of a distance will it be to go from sliding to stationary? And that is the static or sliding speed. But yeah, that's the one we said, like that is the traditional like speed that people look for, which is hard when you're saying like you put your bag on a clipboard and you move it up. You're actually testing the static coefficient of friction and not the kinetic, which I get, but they're not truly not linear to each other, because there are bags that have a sliding coefficient of friction and the static coefficient of friction, like the sliding speed and the stationary speed, that are almost the same, where we have other bags where like their sliding speed is way up here, but their stationary speed is way down here. So that's like a great bag that if you can get it to push, it's going to slide a lot further up the board, compared to where if it's like they're both the same and they're both low, it's just going to push a little bit and then push a little bit, and it's going to be hard to actually get it to the board. So it's like you just want to screw with your opponents and like have a wicked blocker bag. It's those bags that have really low speeds. Both of them are like super comparable and like really low, and they're just gonna be really hard to push.
So how many sets of bags would you say you've done data on?
We have 141 currently on the site. I have a backlog just because I don't want to like dump everything all at once. But I've tested over 160 sets of bags easily.
What is the crossover with Acl Bag Data so far? Like how
so like most of the bags have been ACL bags. There's probably a handful, probably like 30 or so that are non-ACL, but that's part of it. Like we don't care if you're ACL bag or non-ACL bag, right? We're here for the players to find a bag that they want, no matter who the manufacturer is.
I guess I want to know your data versus their data. Is it comparable?
I didn't want to touch that. Like I haven't looked at their speeds to really see like how close mine is to theirs. Knowing that it's the coefficient of friction, because I know I like listened to that episode and you talked about it's static and kinetic coefficient of friction. Our speeds should be relatively close, but I can't say that all of our testing conditions have been the exact same. Like, is the surface on their board, like the finish, is it a polyacrylic? Is it polyurethane? Like, what is the chemical composition of that? Like, I know that a polyacrylic, like the Min-Max polyacrylic, it's a water-based acrylic. Even once it's cured, if it gets into a humid environment, it will absorb some of the moisture. It'll soften up the acrylic, which then means the board is going to slow down.
Yes.
So like, it's hard to really compare those things. That's where I'm like, I control humidity and I can control temperature on both the bags as well as the boards when I do all my testing. So I can be like, all of these are done at 70 degrees, plus or minus a few degrees, at 50% humidity, plus or minus a couple percent.
I just remember that when they first released the numbers, right?
Yeah.
The first time they did all the testing, like people were like, they were having a hard time reading it because like a very popular bag out was Pro Advantage. And you were looking at these charts and you're like, okay, so here's a Pro Advantage, just what I think. And it was like 0.79, something like that on the slick side. And in the sevens, 0.7 something for the slow side. People were like, that doesn't make any sense. It's not a 7 out of 10. Like, you know, compared to, so like, how do you explain that? Like, I guess that's the hard part. Like, I want to try to get across to people that when you're reading these charts, it's not, you can't necessarily look at this as like a 7 out of 10, correct?
I mean, we really did. Like because of the math, I set a 0 value and a 10 value. And all of my values, like you look at it, you go to the page, it'll show like, here's a speed, like my chart knows each row is its own bag. It'll show the stationary, like the slow side and the fast side. And then there's like this bar for each one. So there's like a little dot in the middle and there's a bar. And that bar shows the range of the speed from what we measured, how we measured it. So that's from the highest, like the slowest speed we got to the highest speed. So it's like the standard deviation for that bag, but the average value is the dot. So there are some people who may be playing and be like the range is could be 2 whole points. So it could be like a 5, but the low is a 4 and the high is a 6. Somebody could be like, oh, this bag's a 6, not a 5 to me. And somebody else could be like, no, the bag's a 4 and not a 5. And it truly could come down to their playing environment. Like if they're in Florida and it's always hot and always humid, those boards are going to be slicker or like stickier than like in Arizona where it's just hot and super dry.
Yeah.
And that's where you talked about like it's the objective data compared to the subjective data.
Do you have a set like standard deviation that you consider like significant?
I mean, I let all of the computer calculate the standard deviations, right? Like I take 12 measurements of every single bag. I did that like when I first started. I was like, I'm going to measure one bag 50 times and see where that standard deviation was negligible compared to the rest of them, right? So here's the value averaged the standard deviation and the speed. Here's another value averaged the standard deviation and speed. And it kept going until it leveled out, and now it's at 12 measurements. So conveniently, 12 measurements is when that 12 measurement was no different than that 50 measurement.
Okay.
So like that standard deviation, that range on that speed, as well as that average speed, were no different on 12 than they were for 50. I was like, all right, this is a great starting point. I'm going to use that, and that's what I've been doing the whole time. And I found that's actually pretty
like an average standard deviation that you've noticed between bags, or that they've kind of fallen to, or is it like just depending on materials, like it really varies?
It 100% depends on the material, because like there are some like suedes, like some micro suedes where like it's got a huge standard deviation just because like it'll pull and it'll slide, and like sometimes like it's kind of hard. Part like sucks about it is like the suede actually will start and you'll see the bag jerk forward a little bit and then stop and then jerk forward and stop, and then like once it gets up to speed it'll just kind of slowly go. But because it has those little jerks, I found out in the very beginning I had to then go in and find that first point where like the coefficient of friction, the static coefficient of friction broke, and it was like, you'll see like this little plateau, and then there's a peak. So I'm like, all right, I got to find that value, like the max in that little area.
Okay.
And then that's the static coefficient of friction. And then that over all 12 measurements is the static speed, or the stationary speed. And then I take the last 1,000 samples, average all of those, because the last 1,000 are at the exact same speed, and that is the static or the sliding speed for every bag. Okay. So like there may be only 12 for the static, because I only need that many, because you can actually see like a really clean point where the bag breaks off. But like there are some of them, like it just a little higher, a little lower. Sometimes it's weird. But yeah, the fabrics will have variety in them. I've got to the point, capacity where I can measure fabrics alone and eliminate some of the bag stuff, like the bags themselves. So I have this nifty piece of aluminum that I put a piece of fabric on here, and then this gets pulled across our board, and I have a guaranteed weight every single time. It eliminates the variables of like the fill and the other fabric. Yeah, okay. So like if the top fabric, like so if the backside stretches a little bit more, it may pull the front of the bag down a little bit. If the fill, like as it gets pulled, like shifts a little bit, it'll change how those move every single time. And that's like, I've done as much as I could to eliminate those if I don't get fabrics in my new setup. Like it'll pull, and as I said, like it'll actually move the force gauge down to where there's zero or negligible amount of force or weight being pulled, and then it'll start again. So like it's setting the bag back to square one every single time, and I don't have to touch it.
Which I think is smart. So like obviously cornhole bags, it's like it's kind of like a copycat game right now. You know what I mean? Where we're seeing so many of the same materials filled. I like the fact that you're getting a baseline for each fabric, right?
Yeah.
What have you noticed so far, and how big of an effect does fill have on the performance of a bag, speed-wise at least?
It's kind of hard. So there's the weird parts of like thinking of different fills, like how big they are and how many actual pressure points there are through the fabric onto the board, right? So
it comes to surface area, correct?
Yeah, exactly. So like if you have a bag that's like, and that's where like thickness comes in too, which is hard, right? If you have a bag that's like, I think I talked about it in like a post recently. If you have a bag that's got like super rounded corners and it's super thick, you actually have a smaller surface area than if you had a full, but like a looser bag that's full 6x6 sitting on the board. And the lower the like, even though it's the same way, like truly like surface area does kind of come into play, and fill, depending on how dense it is or how small it is, will impact that surface area of the bag on the board.
So explain to people, if you have a larger surface area. So like something that comes to mind to me is like, have you guys done the numbers for deadheads yet?
No, we have not.
So deadheads is like a surefire, right? It's like for slick side, but that same slow side material, but it's very thin floppy bag, but it plays very big and flat on the board, versus something that is, like you said, a smaller, rounder template. What is typically is the surefire bag like that going to play typically slower because there's more contact surface area, or is a bag that is smaller, rounder, less of a surface area making contact, is it going to be slower?
So like I'm looking at it, it's like a bag that's larger and has more or less essentially less force getting pushed into the fabric. Even though it's got a larger surface area, it's got less force on that total surface area. It should slide a little bit faster going up the board, because it just doesn't have as much like there's like gravity pulling that bag into the board. So it'll probably like bounce a little bit easier, or like it'll just maybe not like bounce off the board, but it'll like hit and kind of like glide up the board, because it doesn't have as much, it has more air underneath of it to like keep it above the board. So there's like all of those kind of things like allow it to just slide up. Or if you have a bag that's like you said, like rounder and denser, it'll hit and it may bounce, but it's going to have way more force in a smaller area, increasing that surface area or increasing that friction going up the board. And that's like, it's hard. That's where I'm like, I've tried to do the best I can with the bags that what I've got to like really eliminate all of those kind of external factors. And doing the research into this, like regular things, surface area doesn't matter so much in the coefficient of friction, but for fabrics it really does. And that's been kind of something I haven't been able to truly nail down and eliminate, except for using this thing which standardizes the surface area every single time.
And are you doing this like zero humidity, like, or do you have like set conditions you try to keep it at?
Yeah, so I actually follow, it's the ASTM, it's the American Standards and Testing Measurements. It's like But more or less, there's this governing body in the US that says, like, if you're doing a certain measurement, you have to do it this way. And I follow those rules, and it says 70 degrees plus or minus like 2 degrees, 50% humidity plus or minus 5% humidity. And that's what I have been doing for probably a year and a half now, all of my measurements at.
Okay.
So I mean,
So
like,
I really do standardize it.
I mean, you've taken it to like the next level where, like you said, you have that consistent, like the aluminum square that you keep holding up, like it's a consistent reading for you on different fabrics. But like at the end of the day, I mean, we can do all of the testing in the world, but are we, based on everyone's different styles, throw different angles coming into a board? I mean, to me, I don't think we're ever going to have like an exact answer to any of this.
That's like the hard, that is true. Like, right, like that's where I'm just trying to be like this base, like, I'm trying to provide information for a consumer, and like the manufacturers kind of like, hey, look at how I compare to other people. But like, what bags you like, the speeds you like, you want to find something that's comparable to it, and that's based off of like your subjective playing style and your personal preferences. But if you're like, I know I really like this one fabric, right? Like all of our bags, we take pictures of all of the fabrics that are on them. You'd be like, I know this bag has this fabric. I'm going to find something that's about the same speed and see if it's the same fabric. But I want something that's faster on one side or slower on the other side. You can find something, hopefully, with the 140, soon 160 bags that matches that, right? And finding something that maybe fits your play style. Like, you may not know that you want a thicker bag, or you may not know that you need something that's a little floppier when it hits the board. And it's hard to do that if you don't have 160 bags laying around. But if you can look at what you've got and what you've played with and compare it to our data, you can then make informed decisions on your next bag purchase. And that's where we're at. Like, I'm not trying to say like these bags are 100% going to be these speeds for everybody, because we know that humidity and temperature change those speeds. But that all of ours are tested the exact same way. So if you need to make a purchase, you'd be like, even though his speed says it's a 5 or 6, I feel like it's a 7. I know that I can kind of change my range to match what his are, like what 6x6s are, and find something that matches that.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to like ash what you're doing. Like you answered exactly how I wanted you to, because like at the end of the day, that's the best we could do, is give people an informed decision. I mean, we do bag reviews based on our shoddy throws, and people tend to listen to it. So like you're going that extra mile further and like giving people straight up statistical data with backing to it. So like, I mean, to me, it's a no-brainer for people to look at your website and use the tools. I mean, it's a no-brainer.
I appreciate that. Yeah, and that's what we're hoping. Like when we first started, like when I first looked at the ACL chart, it was an XY chart, and it had slow on one side and fast on the other. And that was the very first one I had. And I had people looking at it, they're like, I really don't know how to read this. Like, this makes zero sense to me. And that was like one of the very first big iterations, was like, all right, we got to change this chart so people really understand what the speeds are. And that's where we came up with the horizontal chart, where each row is its own bag, and each row has the fast and slow side on it. So you can be like, oh, here's this. We can really look at how the speeds work compared to each other. And that's not like an XY chart. And that also gave us the ability to do those speed scale, like the range for those speeds, which I can say, using this fun piece of aluminum, those ranges have actually narrowed down because there's less variation in those speeds, because we've eliminated so many more things from it. So it's very nice.
I think it's a step in the right direction for us to continue to legitimize sport. You know what I mean? Like, there's going to be more involved bag testing in the future. With that being said, is there anything that you think that is there anything that's not being tested about a bag that you think that would be interesting to at least know?
I actually have fills, just a bunch of different plastic resin fills. And I want to show how density and rigidity of these different fills can impact your bag. Okay. So, right, so like if you have a ball bearing and you compare it to a rubber ball, like a bouncy ball, most people are gonna be like, oh, that bouncy ball is gonna bounce higher than the ball bearing, but it's not, because the ball bearing is more rigid, and it'll like equal and opposite reactions, right? Like the amount of force getting transferred from that ball bearing to the ground is actually going to make it bounce higher, because less of it is absorbed by the ball bearing, because it doesn't deform. So we have like these resins that are like super hard and super dense. those ones are actually going to bounce a little bit higher than a fill that's actually like going to have a little give to it. So that'll change up like.
It's how you hit the tiny
Sorry.
golf ball, 4 football fields.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it doesn't deform very much because of how it's made. Yeah.
That's something that people can look forward to.
Yeah, I'm still developing everything, but that's what I'm going for. Yeah.
So how can people support 6x6?
Yeah, I mean, as a manufacturer, we have a page on our website that talks about testing, right? It breaks down how much it costs per bag, right? So like if a manufacturer wanted to get their bags tested, that first series you send us, free. If you only want one series tested, that's 100% free. We will do that on our time because we want your bags to be represented on our site. Every bag after that is only $50, right? Like I'm not trying to really break anybody's bank because I really want to help those smaller manufacturers who may not have that well of money to pull from, but they need to get those speeds to help really compete with some of the bigger manufacturers. So it's $50 per series. We have a data chart. So it's $100. If you get all the data, like we measure all your bags, we get all the data compiled, we put it into this very beautiful chart that you can then use for marketing. You can put it on your website to then show all of the measurements. So both the speeds, the thickness, the flop, the corner radius, the vertical and horizontal dimensions, because I've found that the closure seam side of a bag tends to be a little shorter than the opposite direction. It's like just random things like that. All that's for free. And then one thing that I'm actually doing with you guys is if anybody wants to, if they're not on the site right now, and they send us bags and they mention the podcast, they will get free click-throughs, right? So you have bags, you have a website, and we have a click-through option on all of our charts. Every single chart we have, you click on your bag, it'll have a buy it now button, and as well as that bag specific web page on our website. So those are 100% free for anybody who mentions this podcast who wants to get their bags tested for the first time.
Oh snap! Look at that.
Yeah, I know. But otherwise, if you're listening and you really want to support us, you can go to the website. At the very, very bottom, there's a thing that says support the science or support the research. And it has a direct, like right there, it directly gives you options for 5, 10, 20, 50, 100. And if we ever get it $1,000 straight donation, it goes right through the website, through Square. We also have Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App. And all of those tags are at the bottom of the page. So if you don't want to go through the website and you just want to shoot us something, it's Venmo is at 6x6bags. PayPal is paypal.me/6x6bags, and Cash App is $6x6bags. So you can send us any amount of money you hopefully can afford and help us continue what we're doing to provide these measurements for everybody.
How much time goes into testing like one series of bag?
I average it out. It's about 2 hours per bag, and that's from all 6 measurements as well as analyzing the data, taking the pictures. If we have probably, I think it's 8 pictures per bag that we take, that we have to then upload. I have to like manually do each of those. I have to like all of the website stuff, like all of that stuff takes an average of 2 hours per bag.
So the reason we started talking a while ago is that we have the website, obviously Hard Drag Push. It's been slacking a little bit. I'm going to be revamping it a little bit. I'm actually going to be closing the Bag Life page, which is, I love the idea of it. It's just something I need help with managing it. So I'm going to be reaching out to some people who I think might be interested in helping manage that bag. But that page is still the most visited page I have every day. People going on wanting to find information. So JD's been gracious enough that we're going to link his information back to 6x6, and we're going to try to create just a flat. The only information we're going to have on Hard Drag Push is a 0 to 100 speed scale. That's what we want. Just something so if you just want to know just the speed of the bag, you can go there. It'll be at one location. And then if you want to know any more information, obviously 6x6 has everything and broken down in amazing detail. For cornhole nerds like me, I love it. I go on 6x6 all the time. If I not had an opportunity to really throw a bag all that much, I go to 6x6. If I know you guys have it on site, I don't. Just to kind of back up, okay, like this is the speed I was thinking it is. This is okay. Here are the numbers to kind of back it up. It's important to have objective data, folks, in order for the sport to continue to grow. And people who are doing the work like you are like unsung heroes. You know what I mean? Like that are doing independent type work. that I think is important for us to be like legitimate outside of, and again, the ACL, they're doing great work. Awesome, cool, whatever. But we need people outside of the big brother to be doing this kind of stuff too, just to kind of keep them on their toes.
Yeah, and I mean, that's what I said. Like, I'm not bashing like their business. Like, I understand it's expensive to get your bags approved and tested and stuff by them. And if somebody doesn't want to go that route, right, that's 100% like where we're trying to help those people. It's like, we don't want to be like, either we can't afford being part of the ACL, or we don't want to be part of the ACL. Like, we're here to help those people out. Like, we want to help you get that data to start with to help bring in those customers. But yeah, like, it's definitely a big part is like making it objective, and that's where it's hard.
We'll work out some deal where when we get bags to review, we'll send them out to you or something, so we can kind of make sure that way, whatever we're saying, you can kind of fact check us on. So we'll review a bag, we'll send them to JD. He'll do all this testing, put them up at the website, and then
he's gonna make us look so bad.
Well, it's all right, listen, but then we'll, listen, we're giving away these bags on our Patreon to our Patreon account users anyways. So I would like to at least have the opportunity to have all this objective data on all these bags that we're reviewing. I mean, last year alone, we reviewed 140 something series of bags. I mean, so we're going through them at a high clip, and we did 3 more tonight. So we'll be nuts. So make sure you check out 6x6, and that's spelled out 6x6.com. Right? Is it just 6x6.com?
6x6
bags.
6x6bags.com. Yeah.
And then if you haven't followed them on Facebook, it is available on there. It's at 6x6bags.
Yeah, and that's where like all spelled out, no numbers.
No numbers.
No numbers, people.
Out.
All right.
Yeah. Don't be lazy. Spell that shit out. 6x6bags.com, or on Facebook, it's at 6x6 bags.
There you go.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was starting to read it. I'm like, it's good. I like it. But yeah, make sure you check out 6x6 bags. I love the data on there. If you're a cornhole nerd or you're a consumer and you want to know what's available out there, what's comparable, go check out the site. I mean, you have, like you said, you have hundreds of bags on there. Let's go check it out.
Yeah.
Look at the numbers, compare, see if you agree with them. Because if you don't, like, you're wrong. I mean, it's science. But besides that, JD, it's been a long time coming. We wanted to have you on the show for a while. Thank you for nerding out with me. I
appreciate it. Like, I'm glad that you guys use the site. Like, it helps kind of show support for what we're doing and that it's valuable for the sport.
Oh yeah, man. I love this stuff. I love all the numbers and nerdy stuff, and I love it. Like all the science stuff, and you're in kinesiology, so we're like cut from the same cloth. So I appreciate every second of that. And we're gonna have to combine forces though. There's a niche that we're missing here on looking at people's throws and either improving their throws to prevent injuries or just improve performance, or there's something we can work together and improving the cornhole world.
Everyone's looking for moves to improve their performance. All right, in all aspects of life.
Correct.
I don't think it's a niche. I mean, you just got to write the book.
You just got to throw on Cornhole Solution boards and throw local bags.
There you go.
Boom. All right, folks.
Like
Katie, thank you very much for joining us.
Guys.
We'll have you hang on for just a second. We'll let the folks at home go. So thanks for joining us, and tune in next week, and we'll have another episode of Audio Gold.
Of course. I mean, that's all we do.
Thanks, Dan.
I still feel like we're trying to talk through the mics. These aren't working, so I don't know why I keep doing it.
It just looks good on camera, so we're doing it. So, as always, we hope you throw straight. And it's nothing but 4 baggers from here on out.
Cornhole it.
Later.